Hey everyone, it's Lucky with Unfiltered Lucky. And today I want to talk about what happened on Saturday in Butler County, Pennsylvania at a rally for former President Donald Trump, in which a 20-year-old young man attempted to take his life with a rifle. Now, I want to start out by saying that this will not be a political video. This is not a political channel, nor will this ever be a political channel. But I want to talk about the incident and how. How was this young man able to get within 150 yards of the former president and presidential candidate? So clearly there was a major breakdown in security. You know, the former president's security detail dropped the ball big time. And I want to talk about all the ways in which that happened. Because a 20-year-old young man should not have been able to get within 150 yards of a former United States president with a rifle. They don't just take a former president or a president or anyone in, government leadership who's doing a speech outside and just put them in the middle of a field and hope for the best. There's protocols and there's a system. So security comes in days before the event and they secure the area. They assess, the entire area where this person is going to be speaking. In this case, it was former President Donald Trump. So they're looking at buildings, they're looking at rooftops, they're looking at tree lines. They're looking at anywhere that someone would be able to hide. Someone would be able to conceal themselves. They cover all of these areas, and they're very thorough about how they do this. So how was a 20-year-old young man able to walk across a field, climb up onto the roof of a building, and squeeze off 8 shots from a rooftop that was less than 150 yards from the former president? The former president stepped on the stage at approximately 6 p.m. Now, just minutes after he steps on the stage, there's people in the audience who see this young man walking across the field with a rifle. They begin trying to get the attention of law enforcement. They're trying to alert the Secret Service that there's a guy walking across a field with a rifle. There were people that were standing less than 100 feet away from this person. So they saw this individual before he even climbed up onto that roof. Now, crazy enough, the roof that he was climbing onto was actually the building that they were using for staging. There was an officer walking around this building. So when this young man climbs up onto the roof of this building, an officer actually follows him and attempts to climb up on that same roof as well. Now, this 20-year-old young man turns around towards the officer, which forces him to drop down. He had both of his hands on the roof. He was climbing up, but this young man turned towards him, which caused him to have to drop down, which would make sense. But they knew that this individual was on this roof before he ever fired one round. So there's spectators who see this individual and they're yelling, this guy has a firearm. They're yelling. And still, this individual was able to squeeze off 8 shots before he was taken out by a counter sniper. So, how was he able to walk across this field holding a rifle and then climbs up onto the same building that they're using for staging and that an officer is walking around and still manage to get off 8 shots? That just makes no sense to me whatsoever. Why wasn't the officer who was climbing up onto the roof minutes before, this all even began, why wasn't he able to contact the counter sniper? Clearly, there was a breakdown in communication. But to me, it's just mind-blowing that spectators saw this 20-year-old young man walking towards that roof with a rifle and were alerting law enforcement. It's even more mind-blowing that law enforcement knew about this individual minutes before before the first round was fired. But yet, he was still able to get that round off. It just doesn't make sense. So, this individual, this 20-year-old kid, I'm not going to mention his name because I just don't feel like it's necessary. I don't feel like we should make him famous. So I'm not going to mention this young man's name. But this young man was carrying an AR. So this is a platform. The AR platform is something that I am very, very familiar with. I build them, I train with them, and I know a lot about them. So when I heard that this was the type of rifle that this 20-year-old was using, which I kind of had already figured that it was, I realized that this former president was extremely lucky, because if that young man would have had any skill whatsoever, we'd be talking about something totally different right now. It would have been a lot worse than it was. I mean, 150 yards is not that far when you're talking about this type of firearm. Anyone with some skill, I'm not talking about an expert, I'm saying anyone with some skill and a decent optic, a scope, would be able to hit their target from 150 yards. It's not that far. It's basically a chip shot. That's close. It's basically the distance from home plate to the center field fence on a baseball field. It's not that far. And with a half-decent optic, it's a pretty easy shot. So this former president is very fortunate that this kid didn't have the skills to pull this off. Because anyone with even the smallest amount of experience, it would have been a different story. There's a lot of different outcomes that could have happened here, because this young man was aiming for the former President Trump's head. He hit him in the head. This former president was shot in the head. A lot of people say, well, he was shot in the ear. He was shot in the ear, but that's basically in the head. Basically an inch away from his brain. So what would have happened if this young man decided that he was going to aim for center mass? That would have been a whole different outcome, because that would have been something easier for him to hit other than, a moving target that's a lot smaller. So it is a good thing that he didn't go for center mass. It's a good thing. Which center mass basically means the center of the chest. From 150 yards, center mass would have made it a whole lot easier. So when I saw this, it made me wonder, was this going to be this young man's JFK? Is that why he was aiming for the head? Why didn't he aim for center mass? Was he thinking that maybe the former President Trump was maybe wearing a bulletproof vest? Or, maybe he was trying to get some shock value out of it. Things would have been a whole lot worse if this young man would have aimed for center mass. So it's a good thing that he didn't. Maybe he was just a little more confident in his abilities than he should have been, which is a good thing. Now let's talk about this weapon that he was using. It was an AR. Now, a lot of people have said that this was a small round. This young man was using a really small round. Well, yeah, I believe it was a 5.56 round, possibly a 2.23 round, which is basically the size of a .22 caliber. But when that round is moving 2,500 feet per second, it's going to destroy anything that it comes into contact with. It's not only going to destroy it, but it's going to tumble around. So when it hits its target, it's going to begin tumbling around inside whatever body part that it connects with. So it's a very dangerous round. Even though it's small, it's very dangerous at the speed that it's moving. Now, I don't know what kind of optic that this young man was using, the scope. I don't know that people realize how close 150 yards is with this type of rifle. The Secret Service or whoever was out there that day, a lot of reports are coming out about, was it actual Secret Service who was out there? Or, who was the security detail that was out there in this field in Butler County, Pennsylvania? Now, there's a lot of questions about the security detail and what they were doing. How experienced were they? Because if you watch the footage after, the former president was hit, it looks like mayhem. It looks like there were a few people on that stage who might not have known what they were doing at all. These people are protecting a former president. Not just a former president, but a very controversial figure. So, in my opinion, when you watch the footage, it looks like they had their B team out there. Why wouldn't you put your best out there? You're standing in the middle of a field. It just, in my opinion, this is a very bad look for the Secret Service. I mean, this is Bush League. How do you allow a young man to walk across a field with a rifle and climb up onto a rooftop where he can be seen by spectators? Spectators are yelling, "Firearm, firearm." How do you allow this to happen? How do you not see, if the spectators all saw it, how does the security detail not see this? How does the counter sniper not see this? Not see the movement of this young man walking across this field? In my opinion, he should have never, ever gotten not one shot off, let alone 8. It's, the action on an AR is very quick. The trigger action is very quick. So it's very possible he got those 8 rounds off in less than 10, 15 seconds. Very possible. But how did he even get to the point where he was perched in order to take these shots? Especially after an officer had already spotted him and was following him up onto the roof. So he already knew that he was there. Did they not have radios? Did they not have communication? How did this young man even get to that point where he was able to make this attempt? It's mind-blowing. This is a really big deal. You know, there hasn't been an attempt like this in over 40 years. This is a big deal. And it's an indication of, in my opinion, kind of the direction in which our society is kind of going. You know, this kid was, I call him a kid, he was a young man, but he was 20 years old. He had never even voted for a president. He wasn't even old enough to vote in the last cycle. So this is a kid, this is a young man who has never even voted for a president. You know, apparently he got this weapon from his dad. And somehow, I keep picturing it in my head, and it'll never make sense to me that this kid was out in the open. This kid walked out in the open with a rifle and still was able to make that attempt and squeeze off 8 rounds. There's a lot of controversy surrounding this because there's a lot of questions. You know, the main question being, how did this young man get within 150 yards of a former president with a weapon? It doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to, keep an eye on this. And as I do, I'll come on and update you all with the information that's coming in. Because right now, there's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of excuses. You know, there's a lot of people that want to hold the Secret Service accountable, as well they should. You know, the head of the Secret Service, she said that this fell on her. She was responsible. They're calling for her resignation, but she's saying that she's not going to resign. This is a big deal, y'all. And as information comes out, I'll come on and update everyone about, this new information and what's coming out. But I just wanted to talk about this. I wasn't really sure if I wanted to make a video about this. Because as I said, this is not a political channel. And it never will be. But I wanted to talk about how this incident happened. And I want to continue to talk about, how this 20-year-old who seemingly acted alone. Now, there's a lot of talk that, maybe this person wasn't alone. But that's how it always goes down. It's always a lone individual. Always. That's the narrative that they immediately begin pushing. So there's going to be a lot of details coming out in this because I guarantee you there's a huge investigation happening right now. So as this information comes out, I'll definitely update y'all and let you know. Thanks for watching my video, and thanks for hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it. And if you liked my video, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Like I said, I really do appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.